Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. This is a Ukraine war news update. First part thereof for the 27th of July 2025. I'm feeling marginally better, a little bit more chipper today. I forgot to mention yesterday, and sorry for all of my Australian friends and viewers out there, but screw you. The British Lions won the second test. I did forget to say that. Sorry I haven't mentioned it already this weekend. But yes, and they are having a right old whinge that something happened about clearing out the ruck in the last few minutes of the game they don't have a leg to stand on that. I'm sorry, I don't know what they're talking about. Anyway, it was one fair and square. Get over it. Right, 920 personnel lost is the personnel loss stat from the Ukrainian General Staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before. All the usual caveats apply. Of course, you can find them linked in the description below. 920 is less than we have seen. It's been consistently over 1,000, although dropped, I think, yesterday, dropping again today. 1 tank, 4 troop-carrying AFVs, 10 artillery systems. That is a really significant drop. So it's been well over the daily average consistently for quite a long time. And to drop down to 10, I think, is significant. 1 multiple launch rocket system, 122 vehicles and fuel tanks. That's fairly high. So a bit of a mixed bag, really, of stats. We've got quite a lot to talk about in this video, so let's crack on. 2 battlefield news items from Ukraine, says Tim White. First, the Russian Colonel Aleksandr Lebedev, the commander of the 83rd Motorized Rifles, is said to have been eliminated in Kharkiv near a new border incursion at Milova. I will show you where that is in a second. And a HIMARS strikes in Sumi destroyed part of Russia's 30th Rifles trying to take Kindrativka. We're going to talk about that as well, because Kindrativka appears to have become an absolute disaster for the Russians. That's good news for the Ukrainians. Ukraine is under a lot of pressure in Pokrovsk. They are holding there, but that's not looking good. So it is a mixed bag. So when I give you the positives, remember there are negatives as well, real challenges for the Ukrainians in a number of places. So the colonel that was eliminated, Lebedev, in the Milova area. So you have this is Kupiansk. You have the Oskil River that comes up here. They've got to cross the Oskil River a number of places up towards the Russian border. You have Volchansk and the other one over here. There are 2. Sorry, my brain's gone a bit nuts. North of Kharkiv city, you have these 2 areas where the Russians have some purchase there. And then you have this new area where the Russians have attacked over the border. And it is there that the colonel has been eliminated. So that hopefully does a good job of giving the Russians pause for thought in that area. Lipsy, that's what I was talking about. Lipsy is just area just there, a town just there that we're trying to take. Anyway, so that has happened. Then we hear about Kindrativka, which is in the Sumi area, just south of where the Russians had attacked into Sumi from Kursk Oblast, where the Ukrainians were in Kursk. Then they got pushed out of Kursk, and the Russians kept going. Then they've been stopped by the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians on that most western side of that. The western flank of that front line just there. There's a place called Kindrativka. There's also Andriivka and Oleksivka. And the Ukrainians are pushing in a number of those places. They've retook Kindrativka, but it's been a bit of a disaster for the Russians. Good news for the Ukrainians. A major Russian defeat in Sumi region. 3 battalions destroyed and surrender, according to this source. And this is a Russian channel, North Channel, saying Kindrativka or Kindratovka. Those who remain from the 30th MRR surrender. Some desperate fighters try to leave the village alone and they don't make it, and it hurts because you understand that you can't help in any way, but you can only grit your teeth and remember, because the war is not lost, but for the guys, these guys, it is already over. There were attempts to lift the blockade, but if they didn't work, it means they weren't enough. On paper, in the reports, everything looks good. In reality, the village fell. Eternal memory to those who stood to the end. And there are a number of different sort of claims about what went on. Kiev says, this morning, Russians are whining about being encircled by Ukrainian forces in Sumi while being progressively turned into a hamburger. So this Russian source says, today my friends confirmed that the fighters of the 30th Motorized Rifle Regiment, who held their positions until the very end, have permanently remained in Kindratovka in the Sumi direction. Unfortunately, it was not possible to break through to them. The enemy was simply non-stop shelling with HIMARS, knocking out our artillery. All this is accompanied by continuous FPV carousel attacks. Eternal memory to the guys. To be a warrior is to live forever. Now the battles for Aleksivka are ongoing there. I've previously written that the armed forces of Ukraine have transferred a colossal number of reserves there from other directions. So it could be another one of these situations that we saw before. And it was kind of the same area. It was, do we pile in loads of troops to Pokrovsk to stem the flow of Russian attacks in Pokrovsk? Or do we attack into Kursk? And the Ukrainians decided to attack into Kursk. Now we have the identical, seemingly, calculation of, well, should we pile troops into defending Pokrovsk, or should we try and take back areas in Sumi in that Kursk direction? And they're going for the Kursk direction by the looks of it, if that is all indeed true. So Null Report says Russian mail bloggers report worsening conditions in Aleksivka, as well as Ukrainian forces press on after liberating Kindrativka. Ukrainian Special Forces and the 425th Assault Regiment are in action, backed by FPV drone strikes. This confirms earlier reports of a deteriorating Russian front in the Sumi border region. So, good news there, at least if there isn't, trouble elsewhere. Now, I have 2 days of Andrew Perpetual loss list to go through. This is from July the 24th, so sort of 3 days ago, then 2 days ago. We'll go for the 3 days ago first. You can see parity in the amount of kit lost, but then when you take out all of these pinks, maybe the Russians have lost just a little bit more than the Ukrainians, but actually that's mainly in the ATV area, really. So in combat assets, probably about the same. Let's go and look at that. Okay, Ukrainian losses first. We have lots of electronic warfare equipment, comms equipment and Starlinks, not too important there. Plaston RP3000. Plaston RP3000. Let's have a look at that. Plaston RP3000. And we get, okay, so that is going to be, that kind of comms equipment, radar equipment. So not a huge bit of kit. That's pretty much what I was thinking. Okay, so a couple of those lost. Then we have an ATPGEO 50. We've seen them before, sort of go on the top of a Humvee. Not huge bit of kit, not crazy problematic to lose, although they are a couple of $100,000. So, it's not nothing. Boat 4 drone UGVs, not too concerned about the UGVs. Are going to be losing a lot of them, but using a lot of them as well. A couple of artillery pieces damaged, a tank destroyed, don't know what it is. A Marder 103 German provided infantry fighting vehicle, that's been abandoned there. Some APCs, mainly M113s, lost. There's BVS 10, that's a Bangzvang 10, that's the articulated tracked one that they've got from Sweden. That one's been damaged by Vandal drone. Got a couple of MRAPs and some mobility vehicles, nothing too crazy. Some all-terrain vehicles and then a lot of civilian vehicles, more civilian vehicles actually than the Russians. Russians have more ATVs than the Ukrainians. If we look at the Russian kit here, we've got what do we have? A Groza 04M electronic warfare piece of equipment. Let's look at that. Groza 04M, and that I was just trying to see. No, well, that looks like a gun there. I don't know that that's the case. Let's try and find it. Yeah, I don't know about the 04M. The 04K is like a suitcase size bit of electronic warfare kit, anti-drone kit. So that's what is listed there. Sorry, I don't know where I was. Okay, so nothing too crazy. Then they've got an engineering vehicle, boat, lots of surveillance and comms equipment. Artillery, quite a bit of artillery here, most of it damaged. All of it damaged, actually. D30s, S60s, that's pretty old. M46, very old. M12, MT12 anti-tank gun, that's pretty old. So nothing particularly new, but I guess that shows what they are using. 3 tanks on the list, 4 infantry fighting vehicles, or BMPs there, BMP2s, actually BMP3s, a couple of BMP3s. I wonder if that signifies that they are making BMP3s still. They're getting them to the front line. Maybe we're not going to see. I talked about this months ago that you are going to stop seeing BMP1s, as obviously they don't make them, they're very old, but they'll cycle through all the ones that they can refurbish, and you're now getting on to, if you're going to put money into refurbishing stuff, and it's going to take you ages, you might as well build new ones. So you're going to start getting more and more BMP3s appearing on the proportionally more on the loss list, and that could be what's happening now, but I don't know. It's just a single day of seeing just a couple of vehicles, so I don't know if I can derive that conclusion from that small data set. Anyway, trucks and a few other bits and pieces, ATVs. You've got Tornado U. That's an APC, not the Tornado multiple launch rocket system. You've got a lot of motorcycles, a lot of quads and whatnot. This shows you what the Russians are using predominantly to do their attacks, and then quite a few civilian vehicles as well. So, 6 of one, half a dozen the other in terms of the losses there. We look at yesterday's losses, about the same in terms of loss numbers. Russia heavier on the artillery losses, lower on the other bits of kit. Ukraine more about mobility vehicles. Actually, a few tanks on the list there. We'll have a look at them in a second. That kind of fits in as well with what we see from the loss list on a consistent basis. So although today's slightly different because there were very few artillery systems compared to normal. Normally it's like 40 artillery systems and 7 AFVs, right? So it's showing you that the Ukrainians are really concentrating on taking out artillery, degrading artillery, and that's going to be, I think, reflected in having more artillery lost in the Russian lists on a daily basis. Let's look at the Ukrainian losses first. Surveillance and comms equipment at the top there, and TPQ-50 again on the list. Some more UGVs, unmanned ground drones. We've got a destroyed 2S-22 Bogdana, the Ukrainian self-propelled gun that they make, that you're going to see more and more of that as they are making them at pretty decent rates. Now, we have quite a lot of tanks here for the Ukrainians. 7 tanks lost in a day is pretty heavy. All of them destroyed or abandoned, so they are irretrievably lost. They're all older Soviet ones, as in they're not like Leopard 2s and whatnot, so that's good news in that respect. Although some of these, even though they're older varieties of tanks, they do get upgraded, even the T-64s. Anyway, nonetheless, we've got a couple of BMPs, BMP-1s, infantry fighting vehicles for the Ukrainians. We've got Snatch Land Rover, some M113s, Max Pro, Senators, all the usual mobility vehicles there, quite a few of them today, where the Russians lost more artillery, the Ukrainians have lost more tanks and mobility vehicles. So I think that makes it a worse day for the Ukrainians than the Russians. Nothing too outrageous on either side, just that this mass of traditional combat assets from the Ukrainian point of view means that they've had a worse day. But I don't know if that's signifying that the Russians just don't have as much kit to lose these days. But anyway, a few interesting observations from different sources here. First of all, we're going to go to Andrew Perpetua, who talks about seeing a video of what he thinks is probably a Stryker armored personnel vehicle being modified and turned into something that's almost indestructible. So he said, I was too busy to talk about this the other day, but there was a Russian video attacking a Ukrainian Stryker that Ukraine turned into an invincible tank. The Stryker ate every single goddamn drone Russia sent at it without even taking a scratch. The armor plan was this. You take a Stryker with the slat armor on top, and on top of that slat armor, you apply a thick layer of rubber, like all over. The whole vehicle is now rubber. Then take slat armor and put that over the rubber. It went Stryker, slat, rubber, slat. This had to be the heaviest goddamn Stryker to ever strike. That little porker probably weighs as much as a goddamn Abrams tank, but it ate drones like no tomorrow, that fat little F. So that's his observation. He said, I think it's a Stryker. Anyways, it's hard to tell, covered in so much stuff as it was. Could have been a command variant of the BTR or something. It honestly doesn't really matter what it is, because this armor layout tanked like 8 FPV drones in a row with no damage at all. The thing was driving down streets and across fields, eating drones all morning. That's what we saw as well with that tank that took, it was a Russian one that took 60 Ukrainian drones to kill it, to completely kill it. And yeah, so here we have Yeah, you may think it's ridiculous, but you do have ways of making these vehicles much more survivable. Obviously, the more armor you put on them, the more survivable they are going to be. But then you're playing around with its mobility and its function as a vehicle. So there's going to be a trade-off there. But rubber is a good thing. Layering it with rubber is going to be a really effective way of protecting against these kind of FPV munitions. Okay, we've got a little thread here from Timothy Milovanov about the British AS-90. So these are the self-propelled howitzers that the British have given to Ukraine, and we've now given all of our self-propelled howitzers, literally every single one. As far as even our ones that we don't train on them anymore, we've given them all to Ukraine. We're going to replace them with our CH-155s, co-produced with Germany. But when I've heard some people have a go at me for not criticising the UK enough, and the UK hasn't done enough, and why do you always criticise America, and why don't you give more? Why don't you give excess equipment? And I'm like, we've literally given our entire fleet of self-propelled guns, literally every single one. I mean, you can't give any more than that, just in terms of excess equipment in that category. And we've given a lot of howitzers, and we're actually manufacturing them on behalf of the Ukrainians out in Ukraine, BAE Systems is. So, there's a fair amount the British have done. British AS-90 howitzers are helping Ukraine's 3rd Assault Brigade hold Izium. Barrels are firing 8 times more than they were built for, and they still preserve their accuracy. Ukrainians have adapted to drone warfare and are using precise strikes to stop Russians, according to New York Times. AS-90 crews killed 5 Russians in trenches with 6 fast rounds, then dodged an FPV drone. Operator Bear said, "That's good work, guys, surgical." Another strike broke up a 30-man assault. None of them wanted to come back, the crew leader called Scripper said. Crew fires AS-90 guns up to 8,000 rounds. The 3rd Assault Brigade holds Izium for over a year as other fronts retreat. Crews say AS-90 beats the Soviet Mr. S in armor, space and recoil control. Ukrainian crews survived drone hits, including a winged drone near their gun. That's probably the Molniya drone. And FPVs hitting their truck. They now use rifle rounds that spread shrapnel to stop drones up close. UK Minister Luke Pollard praised the AS-90's firepower, mobility and toughness in defence. Russia's new fibre optic drones emit no signals, making them invisible to Ukraine's warning systems. Despite pressure, Ukraine's 3rd Assault Brigade, made up entirely of volunteers, keeps full strength, while other units face major shortages. So it's just a summary of that particular New York Times article about the British. Oh no, that's it's the Times. No wonder it's British. It's not the New York Times. They've got that wrong. It's the Sunday Times. Good work, guys. Surgical British guns rattle Russia. So obviously, that newspaper is going to be more likely to be pro-British, right? And saying, isn't it great the Brits have done a good job there? It's not the New York Times, as thought by Milovanov. Right. This is what happens to a Bukanka Scooby-Doo van when it has some ammunition inside and it's hit by an FPV drone. I mean, this is a non-van. It is pining for the villages around the Volga. It is no more. That Bukanka. It has ceased to be a Bukanka. Anyway, don't keep ammunition in Bukanka and expect to survive an FPV drone attack. Right, what else? Now, talking about Russian attacks and using combat assets, it's a rarity when they do these attacks with combat assets. I've explained this to you many a time. Here is a video that has just come out. The entire enemy column was destroyed in this video. Artillery and SBS 155th. The 155th Assault Brigade thwarted the enemy assault in the Pokrovsk direction. So the 155th, by the way, is the one that was pretty controversial, that was trained by the French. It's the Lady of Kiev brigade that had all sorts of issues. Then there were some people in France that deserted from it while they were in France. But they got tooled up with all the kit from the French. And then it was found out that they hadn't received drones and whatnot, which is one of the most prevalent components for any kind of unit these days. And then they were kind of pulled apart and given to all different units. Then it all became controversial, and then they said, no, I believe it's like, keep it together. And so anyway, it's gone through all sorts of hell to get to where it is, and I think it's now doing a pretty good job in Pokrovsk area. So the 155th thwarted the enemy assault on the Pokrovsk direction for the first time in a long time. The Russians threw armoured vehicles into battle, and that's what you see getting destroyed in this 1.5 minute video there. You can go and watch all this stuff to your heart's content, with sound and whatnot, where sound is usually banging techno music. Now I thought I'd show you this. This shows a couple of things. One, that hey, war and nature can coexist. So we have a Ukrainian drone that is lying in ambush, and a bird is just sitting on a propeller, just like chillaxing. I'm hanging out, and then a vehicle comes past the drone, and the bird flies away, and the drone kicks into action, and that's the end of that vehicle. But anyway, good to see a bit of coexistence between nature and warfare. We have consistently seen a lot of video footage coming out of Ukrainians utilizing guided glide bombs. In this case, we've got a GBU-62 bomb being dropped by a Su-27 in the Pischany direction. That's halfway between Kupiansk and Crimea on that northeastern front. It's where they've got to the Oskil River in that middle part, not the Oskil River up near Kupiansk, that middle part, but significant that they are using aviation, I think, in most places on the front line now to support their activities, the Ukrainians. Of course, the Russians likewise doing that. And in fact, let's go and look at the effect of the Russians. This is Pokrovsk direction, or Pokrovsk itself, from the perspective of a drone. And it shows you just the sort of level of destruction and the state of a town, city, whatever you want to call it, in the midst of a war. This is Russian liberation, which is smoke and rubble and explosions. That's how they liberate, which is wonderful. Thank you, Russia. That is Pokrovsk. It is tough there. Very, very, very tough. Fighting pretty much within Pokrovsk at the moment. Russian Su-27UB fighter, almost did an update on this yesterday, because you don't often see Russian planes get destroyed. This was by Sabotage, though. And destroyed overnight the Armavir airfield in Krasnodar Krai. When you start getting Russians sabotaging their own planes like this, then that's good. The base and its aircraft, or I say Russians, it could have been Ukrainian well behind, inside Russia. I don't know who did it. Some kind of partisan activity anyway. The base and its aircraft are mainly used for training cadets from the Krasnodar Aviation School. Locals say communications in the nearby towns are down. So that plane was taken out. I think it was a training plane. Here we have Euromaidan Press saying the Su-27UB combat training jet caught fire overnight on the 26th of July, according to Ukraine's intelligence. The incident happened at the Armavir airfield in Russia's Krasnodar Krai, which lies more than 850 kilometers from the Ukrainian border. Successful sabotage there. And then a little bit more partisan activity. Here we have the Atesh movement, again sabotaging a railway line, this time between Safonova and Novo-Oleksivka in occupied Kherson region, paralysing Russian logistics in the Zaporizhia front. Says no reports. A damaged relay cabinet halted military cargo and fuel shipments towards Melitopol. So easy to destroy those, and impossible to defend them all. This is a kind of activity that is relatively low risk, and comes with some pretty decent rewards. So you keep doing that across the relays, across railways, and then you're going to cause the Russians a real headache. Now, that's not to say that Russian saboteurs aren't doing the same inside Ukraine. The strike rate last night was again not quite, although the night before was sort of 200 or so, but we don't seem to have had like a 700, 600, 500 drone attack for some time. And I wonder what that is saying. Let's have a look at the Dell stats to have a look at the recent, let's turn my face off, the recent numbers for drones. And remember, these are just shot down drones, and we'll see if there is a bit of a dip. I think, I was expecting these huge numbers to go up and up and continue to be a problem. Now, the trend line is still really bad, but if we just make that a little bit bigger and bring that to the side a little, I don't know, I get a sense, you get a couple, that whole white column there, I don't know if you can see it, that means there was no drones at all on that night, and then you've got a number that are right back down here. I just think when you've got a bit of a drop over the last couple of weeks, that suggests something might have happened. So I think you've got two theories to play with at the moment. So 83 drones is, it's still bad. I mean, we've normalized huge numbers of drones, right? But it's not 700 drones. So either the Russians are massively stockpiling for a huge attack any day soon, or Ukraine might have done something to hurt the production of Russian drones. So I know I keep talking about Yellow-Buga and how they have struggled to knock out Yellow-Buga, and I think that should be target number one for the Ukrainians. I absolutely do. So a couple of things. They might have been attacking Yellow-Buga and we just don't know about it. I think that's unlikely, but it could be. More likely, and I suggested this the other day, I didn't suggest it, it is certainly the case that the Ukrainians have been hitting other parts of the supply chain to those drones. So those drones don't have 100% of their components built on site, right? You are going to assemble the drones, but you're going to be getting engines from here and this from there, and bits from all over the shop, and motherboards and microchips and whatnot. Ukraine have been going about hitting these other sites that probably are closer than Yellow-Buga. Yellow-Buga is 1,300 kilometers and less well defended than Yellow-Buga. And that might have had an effect on drone output. Or we're going to get a massive night, and it could well be. I mean, I'm just kind of theorizing and speculating massively here, but it certainly seems like the last week, although there were 200 the night before, that wasn't the 400, 500, 600, 700 we have seen. Okay, 78 drones were taken out of the 83 sent, and that's a really good inception rate. 5 left to do their thing. Obviously, those other 78 are going to fall to the ground and cause problems, but I haven't heard a single thing about any attacks last night, and I think that's significant. There is some pictures. There are some pictures that have come out of the administrative building that was hit in Sumi, not last night, but the night before. This came out just after I did my video, so that was one of the targets from the previous strikes. But really, it's on to Ukrainian strikes now, which is good. I will just throw this one in. Fully Chinese-made drone has been found in Ukraine for the first time. Absolutely zero resistance from the West against the axis of evil. Absolutely no resistance at all, says this particular source. World War III is inevitable now, and it's a direct fault of the West. Okay, so a bit of dooming there. But Telegraph, Daily Telegraph here, reporting that fully Chinese-made drone has been found in Ukraine for the first time. That means that they are manufacturing lethal weapons for Ukraine, and we appear to be sitting back and not doing much about that. China is just pushing that envelope with each successive month in terms of what they're doing for Ukraine. For Russia. And that needs to be recognised. There's a real concern that Russia will be able to win or prevail in a war if China can properly assist Russia, and the West doesn't do anything about that. So that's the only option that Russia has to prevail, is the full backing of China. And at the moment, they are getting more and more backing from China. Now, quite a few strikes last night, but those strikes are going on this morning. This is a Luti drone flying in the daytime over, I'm not quite sure where. Overnight, drone attacks hit dozens of regions. Oh no, I think this was near St. Petersburg or something. People were talking about St. Petersburg seems to be... there seem to be drones around there. Anyway, overnight drone attack, says War Translated, hit dozens of regions across Russia. Russian media report explosions were heard in Volgograd, 12 other regions, and occupied Crimea. Russia claims to have allegedly shot down 99 drones, so almost 100 drones there. More than 70 flights at Pulkovo airport were cancelled or delayed. Here we have, it was Leningrad. Yeah, Leningrad region, sorry. So Ukrainian FPV-1 and AN-196 Lyuty long-range drones were reported over the Leningrad region in Russia. And then we have, amid a drone alert, a reported hit or drone debris can be seen in the Volgograd region of Russia. This is the Oktyabrski district just south of the city, which used to be known as Stalingrad and may be again in a couple of years. So as he's seeing this resurgence in popularity, Stalin, and these previously controversial people are now becoming on vogue again, and you're starting to see statues and names reappear. But anyway, that was well, I don't know, it says just the Oktyabrski district. I don't know if that's the railway station that is on fire there. A fire broke out the oil, and that says oil facility, but in this region I think there's a railway infrastructure that was also hit in this particular area. A fire broke out an oil facility in Volgograd following a drone strike. Local sources report significant damage with emergency services on site. So that does look like something that's significant enough to be an piece of oil infrastructure. You also had a substation that was hit. So the moment of the strike on a Russian railways substation in Volgograd region, and you can see that on this video here. You can hear the drone.
Поехали, парни. Бам! А где звук?
So what's significant about that? You saw the explosion, and then you saw a really light blue electrical explosion as well coming from there. So it wasn't just there it is. It wasn't just the explosion of the drone. You also invariably took out some electrical infrastructure there. Now, here I'm going to read you the reaction of Roy before reading you the original. Roy says, finally, may this be just the beginning of a sustained campaign against the Achilles heel of Russia, the vulnerable electric system powering the transportation backbone, the railway system. So Tatragami says, another Ukrainian drone strike inside Russia, likely targeting a railway traction substation in the Volgograd region. The strike caused a visible fire. Some reports mentioned a nearby oil refinery, but our analysis points to the substation. More details in the thread. So this is why I was saying, initially I was like, I'm not sure if what that is. Here, Tim White, references a big explosion. No report says an oil facility, but that could be the substation that was hit there. So Tatarigami says that it's more likely it was not an oil refinery, but a substation. He says NASA's firm's system locates the fire at the area where the substation is located, marked by the red rectangle on the map. The governor of Volgograd also stated, quote, due to falling drone debris, power supply at the railway's network in the Oktyabrski district has been disrupted. The Zhutovo railway traction substation powers the electrified rail line between Volgograd and Kotelnikovo. Disabling it cuts power to electric trains, disrupting traffic along its important logistical route. But what makes it particularly important, along the Volgograd-Kotelnikovo line, several key industrial facilities are located. The petrol factory, heavy or military related production, the Kirill factory, heavy industry, including defense manufacturing, and the Urman factory, metallurgical and machine tool output. The final station on this line, Kotelnikovo, is also home to a military airfield, the 213th Training Aviation Base. While primarily used for training military pilots, it has previously been observed participating in rare combat operations, including missile launches. So, hitting this railway infrastructure may well have a much greater impact than you might think. So, War Translated says, on the back of drone attacks in Russia today caused train delays in Zhutovo station. In the Volgograd region, Russian rail officials blame drone debris falling. Photos show fire and smoke near the station. Several long-distance trains were delayed for hours. Then saying, pointing out this map here, that's where we're talking about as being the site of the strikes from Ukraine. Ukraine's drone campaign is systematically targeting Russia's key southern rail corridor, which supplies the Donetsk front and Crimea. Ukrainian OSINT group Oko Gora reports this is already the sixth attack in the past week, according to their update. So, sixth attack on the rail infrastructure possibly in that area. And here now we're just seeing this. I mean, it's only 4 seconds of video, but this is that station in that region, and there looks to be some fairly wide scale destruction there. The question is whether that is going to long term disrupt the rail system in that area. Will trains be able to run or not? And I guess we won't know yet. So that's really significant, and I think you're seeing more and more targeting of rail infrastructure. I think both sides are doing that, actually, to be honest. War Translated then says exclusive footage released after a delay by XL Nova for operational security shows Ukrainian Defense Forces drones targeting a military facility in occupied Crimea. Russian air defense activities also visible in the video. This is a really interesting video. I'm not going to play it with sound because I get into trouble. But what you hear is this guy going, obviously saying the usual stuff and swearing and saying, get it. But you have an air defense system working to shoot down a drone really close to where this guy is. This is a machine gun mount or somewhere. Obviously, this is some kind of military base or near an air base or something in Crimea. That tower, he says F shrapnel, as that drone is taken out by some kind of air defense missile. It's raining down shrapnel there. You got that machine gunner there, and you got other posts around. And he talks about this forest at the back, that there's a drone that he can hear, and he points it out. Let's play the sound here.
Вон он, над лесом!
So you can hear the drones, and then he start firing at it with some tracer bullets from all these different areas, a number of different places firing, or a number of different directions as well, which makes me think they don't really know where it is. They're firing it in loads of different directions, just firing blindly into the air. And then you've got this guy there with some kind of man pads, then appear to take out the drone that is indeed over there. So yeah, all sorts going on. It seems like the initial rocket came from that may be being a man pads as well, but somewhere else. And then you got a guy right close here. So it all seems pretty chaotic. I guess they successfully took down 2 drones by the looks of it here. So, the Russian air defense is working there. And that's why we talk about how good are the Russians now at taking out Ukrainian drones? Are they improving their interception rates so that we're not hearing of so much damage? Here is a Russian base where it looks like 2 drones are taken out by very close range air defense. Now, talking about Pulkovo Airport, here it is this morning, which is indeed this morning. Flight cancellations and delays due to the threat of Ukrainian drone strikes are becoming routine. I'd give up going on holiday from Russia unless I'd make sure I fly from somewhere really weird and out of the way. But yeah, it's a bit of a nightmare for those Russians, but that's what happens when your leaders decide to take you to war. Right, don't know what this is, but it's a picture of an unknown drone. I don't know what the drone is. It's an unknown Ukrainian jet drone that's been found after attacks. This was yesterday, after attacks on Russian territory. So that may well have been utilized 2 nights ago, but it's a drone that we've never seen, and it looks like a jet drone. It's obviously malfunctioned, didn't get to where it was supposed to go. Someone says Mega Boba being the beaver, that's the name for the beaver drone. It looks like just a bigger version of that is what they're saying, but I don't know what it is. Then we have the strike by the Luti drones, 2 Luti drones, and 1 new type of drone that Ukrainians are using that looks rather like a Shahid drone. And this is what you're seeing on this sort of GIF video or whatever, where that's the Shahid style drone. Hits. So you got 3 hits on the signal radio plant in Stavropol. 2 by those Luti drones, 3rd by the unidentified Shahid type drone. The plant manufactures electronic warfare radar and navigation equipment for Russia's military industry. Hard to know what the actual damage was to that place. And you can then see some of the damage on satellite imagery. My thoughts are always like, if you want to take out a place, just hit it with 20, 30, 50 drones. Just, you got to pick one place and go to town on it, rather than 3 drones at this place, 3 drones at that place, and so on and so forth. Right, Russia cancelled its main Navy Day parade in St. Petersburg due to security concerns. That's likely to do with the threat of drones, maybe, I don't know, sabotage another way. According to Putin's press secretary, Peskov, even the showcase events are no longer safe. So that's how Russia has been affected. And actually, on Russia's Navy Day, Putin has arrived at the main admiralty in St. Petersburg to review the July Storm naval drills held from July 23rd to 27th across the Northern and Black Seas, the Pacific, the Baltic and the Caspian. A PR move, while the actual Navy Day parade was quietly cancelled over security fears. So that was that. Now we're moving on to other bits and pieces. Not a great deal in this section, so that's good for those of you who've got things to do. North Korea may deploy additional troops to Russia to participate in a war against Ukraine in July or August, and that's coming from the South Korean intelligence services. Reuters reports that Pyongyang continues to supply weapons to Russia. So they could well receive troops very soon. That wouldn't surprise me, and that will be an absolute disaster, I think, for the Ukrainians. South Korea's National Intelligence Service believes that Russia may be ready for a large-scale attack in July or August. Oh dear. Russia starts the first Moscow-Pyongyang passenger flights in decades, signalling closer ties. As another sign of deepening relations, Russia is set to launch direct Moscow-Pyongyang flights, the first air connection between the two capitals in decades. Now, I want to return to the protests that were taking place with regard to the law that was introduced recently, and then there's been this counter law that's going to come out that's hopefully going to allay the worst fears of the protesters. So, you know, the Ukrainian government was listening to the protests. Now, this is JP Lindsley. JP Lindsley is a right-wing sort of pro-Republican journalist, but a staunch supporter of Ukraine, and spends his time trying to appeal to particularly MAGA voters. How do you change the mind of MAGA voters? By coming at this from a kind of pro-Ukraine but MAGA side of things. And I think that's super useful. Like, I don't agree with a lot of JP Lindsley's politics. I met him. We drank wine together in Kiev. So, but I don't agree with him. I really enjoyed chatting to him. But he's super useful for doing the work of being in the in-group of the people whose minds you need to change and trying to change those minds. He's talking about American investor Deborah Fairlamb. I met her in Kiev as well. On the night I met Kaylin Robertson, actually, when they're at a fundraiser at a bar in Kiev. So there's corruption in every country. What's different about Ukraine is that people call it out loudly, regularly, together. So that's a quote from Deborah Fairlamb, an American investor. She was at the Kiev protests this week. Her first-hand accounts, says Lindsley, reveals what Western media gets completely wrong. So let's go through this. The scene, per Deborah, thousands of people peacefully gathered, chanting and singing, and just one police car 3 blocks away. These Ukrainians came out during wartime to protest one thing, a law threatening the anti-corruption agencies. Deborah, co-founder of Green Flag VC, so it's a venture capital, Green Flag Ventures, invests in Ukrainian military technology. She knows Ukraine better than most any American. Her insight, Ukrainians use, and this is really, really, really important. So when we have conversations about corruption, when Ukrainians talk about corruption, they talk about a whole range of things that you might not ordinarily think is corruption. So when they're frequently saying, we've got corruption, some of those things they're talking about are things that happen openly in, say, the United States and aren't seen as corruption. For example, lobbying, right? So her insight, Ukrainians use one word, corruption, for 5 problems Americans would never group together. This is why we misread Ukraine. This is so important. So in Ukraine, corruption means what Americans split into 5 categories. 1, oligarchy and monopolies. In US, you call that good capitalism. 2, theft from public purse. In the US, that's called theft. I guess, corruption. Insider access is the 3rd one. In the US, that's called lobbying. 4, bribery. In the US, that's also called bribery. And 5, government overreach harming society. And in the US, that could be any number of things. So that 5th category, the government overreach, that's what these protests have targeted, which isn't technically corruption. It is just a growing sense of autocracy. right, or authoritarianism. And goodness, don't we know that's happening in the US? Ukraine has 5 agencies dedicated to fighting corruption. The US has 0, although obviously there are other departments and agencies that take on the role of stopping corruption from happening, right? The protesters came to protect these agencies, and it worked. Zelensky now says they'll rewrite the law with civil society input, but protests continue. A pledge is not enough. Saying no to the sort of corruption that is tolerated in the USA is what fueled the 2014 Maidan revolution. This is also what drives the current protests. So when you see corruption in Ukraine headlines, Deborah asks, which of these 5 behaviours are they talking about? Would we even call it corruption in the West? Are we judging Ukraine by standards we don't apply to ourselves? So freaking important. Her point, you hear about Ukrainian corruption constantly, not because they have more, but because they refuse silently to accept it. Western approach, accept lobbying, monopolies, insider trading. Ukrainians' approach, call it all out, even under Russian missile fire. I'll take the Ukrainian approach, Deborah says, even if it means the word corruption hangs over Ukraine now. This is a short-term pain for long-term strength. So next time you see Ukraine corruption headlines, remember Deborah's insights. They define it more broadly than we do. Their openness about it is a feature, not a bug. And they're not only protesting, they're fighting off Russia to keep their ability to protest. Consider, while fighting for survival against Russia, Ukrainians still demand more accountability from their government than most peacetime democracies. They march, they demand changes, they hold their ground. And they stay cool, no riots, no looting, self-policed. Deborah's conclusion, quote, Ukrainian civil society is so strong that thousands will peacefully gather to defend anti-corruption institutions even under the threat of Russian missiles. That's not weakness, that's resilient people. So JP Lindsay says, what do you think? Would you like to change the definition of corruption in your country? So that's JP Lindsay there for you. Interesting observations there from Deborah Fairlamp. So I wonder if I should see if I can get her on and speak to her. Anyway, moving on. So War Translated has said Trump no longer believes the Kremlin is willing to negotiate an end to the war. And Washington may change its approach, says US Secretary of State Marco Rubio. So we have heard rumours recently that Marco Rubio has been responsible for the Trump administration, for Trump himself, to change his views slightly on Russia, China, Venezuela, a number of different places. It's actually Marco Rubio who's been dying inside every time that he's in the presence of Trump and Vance saying all these crazy things that Marco Rubio would have said the complete opposite to in times gone past. We've seen these images of him sinking into sofas, of dying inside. But it could be that he has had some effect on Trump. So he notes that Trump is losing patience with Moscow's empty talks and is now leaning toward practical steps to force Russia to shift its position. I bloody hope so. I really, really do. Right, 2 things to leave you with. 1, this is what becoming a prisoner of war does to you. Instead of 1,000 words, this is Ukrainian defender Alexander Kirilenko before and after Russian captivity. So that is being a POW for you. Just remember that, and remember the hundreds, thousands of people in those positions. But let's leave you with a nice bit of Top Gun from the Ukrainians. Top Gun Ukrainian style here. We'll not play a bit of Evanescence, was that? Anyway, here they are flying in a group, actually, which is more of a rarity. That's not how the Soviets used to fly. So there could be a change of tactics going on there. But anyway, nice roll over his matey. And yeah, that's how, yeah, I wish I could be that cool. I mean, you know, I know I am. Legend of the multiverse, right? Okay. Thank you very much for watching. Really appreciate your support. I've got a big old military aid news video coming out with a load of stuff on because lots have been happening and I haven't been with it the last few days, so it's built up quite a bit. You got that to look forward to for today. Take care and I'll speak to you soon.